Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of New Teacher Talk. Today's episode is all about bulletin boards. So I would love to know, how many bulletin boards do you have in your classroom? My name is Rachel Vincent if you're new around here, and it is my passion to help new teachers learn how to run an effective and efficient classroom so that they can thrive instead of just barely surviving their first years of teaching. If you are a new teacher and you would like some more guidance on procedures, classroom management, things like that, I have a free guidebook that you can download that I included everything I wish I would have known as a first year teacher. You can grab that at missrachelvincent.com/guidebook. I am so excited to be talking to you guys today about bulletin boards. I have two square bulletin boards that kind of frame my whiteboard. And then I just have like a strip, like a bulletin strip, it's not really a board. So let's see, one really long one inside and one outside, two big ones and one square one. I have 4 bulletin boards in my room. I have 2 small and 1 gigantic one, lots of whiteboard space. Oh, I'm jealous of your whiteboard space. My Promethean board is right in the middle of my whiteboard, so I have teeny tiny bit of whiteboard space. So let's chat about bulletin boards. So there's 2 ways you can look at your bulletin boards of the first thing deciding like what in the world you're going to put on it. And you can do either a seasonal bulletin board or an evergreen, which just means you can leave it up all year long. I highly recommend the one you can leave up all year long because it's less work for you. It's sort of like a sit it and forget it. And so then you want to just think about, what are you actually going to put on it? Is it going to be like a subject-based bulletin board? Is it going to be sort of like a command center, like with your calendar and maybe schedule? Is it going to be a place where you hang student work? So kind of think through what exactly you want to go on your bulletin board. There are lots of different ways you can do it. I have one bulletin board that has my calendar and schedule and just some informational things. And then I have another bulletin board that is dedicated towards our class goals. It has our class mission statement, and we track our class goals. And then I track my own personal goals because the students keep their goals in their notebooks. So my bulletin boards are very much, they don't change much, just a few things. And then the strip I have in the classroom, I turned into a bulletin board, and that's where I hang anchor charts. It's on my back wall. And then, of course, I hang student work outside in the hallway. Again, no, it's not an actual bulletin board. It's just a little strip. So you gotta do with what you got. Marissa, you love my shirt. Yes, I got this when I was in New York. I went to the NBC studio tour, which was amazing. And I found this in their gift shop. They got me. I love Friends. It's my favorite. So let's talk visual aspects of a bulletin board. So again, there's also 2 ways you can look at how you want to decorate your bulletin boards. What I did this as a first year teacher is I made each bulletin board have its own complete look. But visually, what makes your room seem like it's more put together is if your bulletin boards match. And you can do that 2 different ways. You can make them completely match with, actually 3 different ways. Completely match with backgrounds and borders, or you could do the same color background and just change your border, or you could flip-flop it and do different colored backgrounds with the same border. It keeps that sort of visual appear, especially if you have longer bulletin boards, like as that eye is scanning the room, if it's all different, your eye just jumps and it feels kind of, I don't want to say chaotic, but it visually kind of messes with your brain. And so if it all looks the same or is cohesive, your eye tends to flow better across it and it feels more put together. So think through how you want to do that. I had a really long one my first couple years of teaching, and I did divide that up, but the background was the same and I used the same borders. I just put extra borders, to kind of split it up so I could define the space. So speaking of backgrounds, there are different things you can use for backgrounds. I personally use fabric. It's just what I've used probably since my second year of teaching. I just find solid color fabric because, again, If you're using a pattern, it tends to get a little busy and your eye tends to kind of bounce around. But they've recently come out with some amazing bulletin board papers. So probably if I didn't already have the fabric, I would invest in these. You can get fadeless paper, which keeps it from obviously fading, which means you can keep it up longer. And there's this new brand called Better Than Paper, and it's like a thicker material. And I've heard that you can actually write on it with a dry erase marker. So that turns your bulletin board into a board, which sounds amazing. And then some cheaper options, of course, are you can use a plastic tablecloth, especially if you want to get some brighter, vibrant colors. I've done that in the past, but just remember those tear easily, so you'd probably have to reinvest every year. But at Walmart, they're 98 cents, so it's not that big of an investment. And then, of course, the free option, most schools have the butcher paper, which is what I used my very first year of teaching because I didn't have the money to invest in fabric yet. So that's always an option too. Just know that it will fade. You'd be surprised, but it will fade big time. So, borders. Does anybody else get excited when they look for borders? I don't know why, but sorry, I have some borders here. My number one tip when it comes to borders is to layer your borders. So you want to have, instead of just putting this up or just this up, you layer it and it gives it just a different effect. And I really, really like the way this looks. I've done this, gosh, forever. And it's 100% my favorite. Now, if you have like this one's straight and this one's curvy, so I could totally just put these up as I go. I would put this one up first and then kind of tuck this one under and staple. But if you have two curvy borders you're doing, I would suggest, because I made the mistake of this too, is actually stapling them or gluing them or taping them on the off the board first, and then taking the whole thing to stick up. It's just a little bit easier to do than to try to match your curves while it's already put up on the board, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. Again, making your borders the same across all of your boards tends to simplify it. Also, think about that design piece. If it's a really busy border, it's going to be a little distracting. Your eye kind of bounces instead of just flows across the room if they're looking sort of in general. And then one of my favorite things to do is add some sort of 3D element. I have, one year I used actual paper plates, and I put my letters in the paper plate and then stapled them up on my bulletin board to kind of make it pop off the bulletin board. I like to get these little fans and different things from party sections. A lot of times you can find them in the dollar spot at Target or Party City or Walmart. Usually has cheap party supplies. And then I just will hot glue it onto my board or onto my border, and it just gives it something to kind of pop out. I've also done the poofy balls, the tissue paper balls. Those are a little bit harder to put up. I find the fans a little bit easier to do. And then fonts, the words, your words. Of course, you can get the kind you buy from a teacher store and punch out and put those up, but oftentimes I want larger ones. So I make them on my computer. So all you have to do is find a thick font, because you want to cut it out and it to be kind of a thick font, and you make it as large as possible in so that you could put one letter per slide. I use PowerPoint because it's easier to manipulate than Word. And then you can print it out on Astro Brights paper, which is what I tend to do because that tends to be my colors in my classroom. Or you could put up, instead of just doing the outline so you can cut out the color, I've also done it solid and printed one per page and kind of make it center and just use the whole page as my letters. And then this tip is a lifesaver. Get yourself some painter's tape so that you can put your letters on on a flat surface and take a strip of painter's tape across all of it and stick it. And then all your letters are in a nice straight line, and then you just stick it up to your bulletin board, and then you can staple it and pull the painter's tape off, and your words are nice and straight instead of trying to have to guess, because that's tough too. That also works if you're doing like things like on your walls. I'm allowed to hot glue on my walls, so I'll use painter's tape to tape it up to kind of make sure I have it where I want it, and then I'll put the hot glue on so that I can see what it looks like and adjust it before it's all glued down or stapled down. So those are my top bulletin board tips. If you have other suggestions, I'd love for you to throw it down in the comments. Lori says, what do you use and where do you put your word wall and math vocabulary? So I have a lot of cabinets in my room, which take away a lot of my bulletin board or wall space. So a lot of my vocabulary and things like that go on my my cabinet doors. So I use a lot of that, those spaces. I put up like paper size 8.5 by 11. I use those size posters. I put those on my cabinets because they're, especially the ones above their cubbies, they're a little bit smaller. And then I have like a really long cabinet, so I can put larger things there. So that's where a lot of that goes in my room, just because I don't have a whole lot of space. Because my storage takes up a lot of my wall space, which I love my storage, so I just have to work with it. Another thing, I just remembered this. So when you're laminating, right, you get that glare from the light. If you buy it's like a clear matte spray. You find it in the like paint spray section. And I have a picture of it. I'll put it in the comments after this. If you spray that on your laminating, it will take that shininess away. So then when it's hanging on your wall or your bulletin board, it doesn't matter where you're at in the room, the light doesn't reflect off of it, and your students can actually see what's on your laminated pieces. So that's another little extra tip for you guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope that was some tips for you guys, maybe some new things. And on Friday's episode, we are talking just decorating tips in general. So come back for that, because I'm excited to share just sort of decorating other areas in the classroom besides just bulletin boards. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday, and I will see you on Friday.